Idea, Kenji Okamoto, who admitted to drinking before getting on a plane for his honeymoon, was arrested after taking a swing at a flight attendant on the flight from Osaka to Honolulu last month. He was apparently angry his tray wasn't removed quickly. He was arrested in Honolulu and never got to start his honeymoon at a luxury resort. Pam Coulter, CBS News.
Hey, you, in the DXL dressing room. You're more than just an average Joe in a new outfit. You are a magnificent man about town. Before you unleash fashions like Lucky, Lacoste, and Nautica, ask yourself, are you ready to look this good? Is the world ready? All the best men's brands, waist size 38 and up. DXL, you're looking good.
Buy one full-price Harbor Bay woven shirt or shorts, get 50% off a second one, now through June 15th.
In San Francisco, go-getting entrepreneurs get up and go to La Cocina. It's part kitchen, part business incubator, and Wells Fargo is proud to support it all. The chefs bring the talent, we help fund the tools, helping to create jobs and small businesses for the community. It's one of 18,500 organizations we work with every day. Little by little, we can do a lot, because small is huge. Visit wellsfargo.com/stories to see how big small can be. Wells Fargo, together we'll go far. Wells Fargo Bank and A, member FDIC.
Well, here we are with another edition of Justice for All. I'm your host, George Yates, and we're here today. Another lovely day. Why is the weather always so beautiful when we have this show? Saturday afternoon. It's a special Father's Day weekend show that we're having today. My guest today on Justice for All is a member of what Tom Brokaw called The Greatest Generation. Brokaw wrote a book about this generation of Americans that fought World War II, grew up during the Depression, and left this United States, the most powerful nation in the world, and then left it to the rest of us, baby boomers and Generation Xers and Yers and millennials and all the rest of us. But there's not too many that are left here that can remember back when the time there was Prohibition, Depression, a World War, the rise of nuclear weapons, and the Cold War. And our guest today has been through all of that. He's the youngest graduate of the United States Naval Academy and was serving in the United States Navy following his graduation from the Naval Academy. And he was in the Japanese theater serving aboard a destroyer when he was only 20 years old when D-Day, 70 years ago this month, took place half a world away. So while our guest today was fighting the Japanese near Guadalcanal, our other brave Americans were storming the beaches in Europe. He's here today. His career following leaving the Japanese theater, he was brought back to America, where he went to flight training, because back in those days, the war in Japan was still going on. The war in Europe had ended. And our guest came back in 1945 and was in flight training because, as many of you know, when we dropped that atom bomb on Japan, we did not know whether we were going to do that or not. And there was projected to be a long and bitter bombing war in order to win the war in the Pacific. So while our guest was taking flight training, the 2 atom bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war ended, and our guest continued to fly airplanes, though, for many, many years. In the course of our interviews, it turns out that he has logged more than 6,000 hours in the cockpit of an airplane. We figured that out. What is that? More than 8 months in an airplane, and had more than 800 carrier landings. He was a pioneer in the use of United States jet aircraft aviation. He was the skipper of a fighter squadron VF-41 in Oceania. He was also skipper of the VAH-9, which was a heavy attack squadron that was carrying nuclear weapons in Sanford, Florida. He spent a couple of tours in the Pentagon and also spent time in Vietnam. He made admiral in 1969 and retired from the Navy in 1974. Perhaps his greatest achievement, or probably the most famous accomplishment in this area, was that our guest today was the first skipper of the United States, John F. Kennedy, which was commissioned in 1968 here and was decommissioned in 2007 in Mayport, Florida. I believe the Navy is now building another Big John. Many of you out there listening to this show today know about the Kennedy and have stood on the beach in Virginia Beach and watched Big John as it went out to sea. And this man was the first skipper of that aircraft carrier when it was commissioned in 1968. So anyway, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest today, who's my dad.
And you're my son. And I can recall that you were born also in the Naval Hospital over here at Portsmouth, close by. And when your mother was lying on a couch in the living room and I was painting a stairway, her water broke and you were there pretty soon. So that started this father-son interview.
And here we are. My guest today is Rear Admiral Earl P. Buddy Yates, retired, and he was first, as I said, skipper of the Kennedy in 1968. I'd like to just kind of you go by. So many people call you different things. Nobody's ever called you Earl, I don't believe.
Well, my grandmother called me Earl, but most people call me Buddy.
All right, so Buddy Yates is here. Of course, I call him Dad or Admiral sometimes, or even sometimes Buddy. And anyway, he's a great guy, and he's here today. He was born in 1923, so we had a big 90th birthday celebration for him last December, and he's going strong. So I'd like to just start with probably your Naval Academy years in the war. That's a very interesting topic. You were the youngest man to graduate from the United States Naval Academy, and how old were you when you graduated?
I was 19. I was the youngest commissioned graduate. There'd been earlier commissioned, but that was I was commissioned right out of the Naval Academy as well. But my time in the Naval Academy was really my total introduction to the Navy. I was so young and so impressionable that it became more of a part of my life than most of the people who go there, who get in at an older age. The reason I went to the Navy, my father was in the Army in World War I and had wanted me to go to West Point, so he had an appointment to West Point. But I was in college at the time, preparing I was going to go to a couple of years of college, and my father was there to help me to pay for it before going to West Point. And during my first semester at University of North Carolina, he died, and I didn't want to continue to be a money drag on my mother's funds. So I called my congressman and said, asked him if I could get into the Naval Academy that summer, because I could get into the Naval Academy a year before I could get into West Point.
Because you were only 16 at the time, right?
I was only six. Well, at the time he died, I was still just 15.
And you're in college at Carolina.
And I was at the University of North Carolina, I was a freshman there. And so when I asked my congressman, he said, I've already given that appointment away to friend of mine up in North Wilkesboro. So, but if you wanted to go up and see him, and the two of you make an agreement, he might switch with you, and he go to West Point, you go to the Naval Academy. So I said okay, and I got in my mother's car and drove up to North Wilkesboro and found this young man plowing out on the side of a hill. And we talked for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and I told him my problem and the story, and he said, my daddy's a little bit ill, and maybe he could use me around here for another year or so. Yeah, I'll trade you. And so I went back and called the congressman, and he said, okay, you got the appointment. And so I went to the Naval Academy when the next year or the next summer when I was 16. So that's why I went in so young. And it turns out that before I made lieutenant commander, this guy that had switched with me had already made chicken colonel, and I was. People were asking me, "What's happened to you, buddy?"
Well, that was a great switch for both of you, then, obviously. Well, so you went on to the Naval Academy. You met our mother there,
right?
And she passed away in 2007, and she's buried on a hillside there, right on the grounds of the United States Naval Academy, isn't she?
Right.
Looking over that beautiful Severn River.
Right.
And, of course, you really wanted to go to the Naval Academy more than West Point anyway, so it was a good thing for you.
Right.
You love the Naval Academy. It's a beautiful setting, a wonderful institution. After you graduated, I guess you were class of 44 from the Naval Academy, right?
Oh, graduated in 43.
Right, you graduated a year early because of the war.
The war accelerated the academy classes, and instead of going on plebe summers and cruises, we went to school and finished the 4 courses, 4 years and 3, and graduated in the summer of 43.
And so how many months did you spend in the Japanese conflict or the Pacific War?
I was there about a year and a half on a destroyer called Dyson in the Little Beaver Squadron, probably the most famous squadron in war. Admiral Earl Burke, who was later became Chief of Naval Operations, was our Commodore, and quite an interesting leader, wonderful leader.
We're here on Justice for All. I'm your host, George Yates. We are here with Buddy Yates, who's the first skipper of the USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier. Anybody listening in that wants to have a call in and say hello to Admiral Yates can give us a call at 454-1650. When you returned from the war was still going on then. The Japanese war was still still raging. You came home, went to flight training in Ottumwa, Iowa, and the idea was that you were going to get your wings and go back out and fight in the Pacific War, right?
Right.
But that didn't happen.
No, the war got over. The atomic weapon terminated the Pacific War. Of course, the European War had been over for quite some time, and it was quite a shock to many of us that the sudden drop in intensity of what was the fear, the danger was so much reduced. And
what was that like?
It was a feeling of, in me, it was sort of a feeling of relief from that constant strain of facing danger with a very, very tough bunch of guys that you were fighting, and I had seen kamikazes I knew they were serious. You get a kamikaze try to hit you, and you can see him from the outside of the ship, and you know that he knows he's not coming out of it, and so it's an interesting feeling.
What was the feeling? Just because those of us who've never been around when an actual bomb was dropped, because I think those are still the only 2 atomic weapons that have ever been dropped in a war situation. What was your thought that went through your mind the first time? Because you had no idea that was about to be. It was a top secret, of course. What emotionally? What did you experience when you first heard about this bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima?
Well, we were all quite pleased. All of we didn't believe that the Japanese would even continue on for another day, much less a week or so, or 2 weeks, or whatever. And then we dropped the second one. The Japanese were a tough bunch of people. To convince them even then, to surrender was a major feat. But they were great fighters. They were very brutal, cruel, and vicious to deal with.
Your next, I guess, 20 years in the Navy were years of flying airplanes and serving in various jobs as regarding naval aviation. Can you give us a little chronology of where you went after flight training?
Well, my first squadron, I went through flight training in Florida, in Texas and Florida. Started up in Ottumwa, Iowa, but I ended up flying the F-6F in my advanced training.
Which is a propeller-driven plane.
Yeah, it was a propeller-driven aircraft that was quite a good fighter for Navy use in war. The war was just about over when it was entered into the fleet, but I then went from there without going through carrier training to a squadron VBF 82 up in Quonset Point and flew Corsairs. I'd never flown Corsairs before, but I flew Corsairs and deployed on the old Randolph to the Mediterranean. And one significant feature of that trip to the Mediterranean was we returned the Greek gold that had been stolen, that had been saved from being stolen by the Germans during World War II. We had that gold in Fort Knox, and the Randolph took it into Athens, and I carried the papers in a briefcase for that return of that gold. That was quite an interesting thing to do for a young naval officer, but that was a lot of fun. And from there, I went to graduate school at the Naval Academy, and then at MIT. And after that, went to VX3. The VX3 was a squadron that dealt in development of tactics for aviation airplanes, new airplanes, and had about 10, 11 different airplanes.
Are we still driving propellers here, or are we moving into jets yet?
We're in both. I flew both the old SPAD, the AD there, and we had the Banshee and the F6F and some jets there as well. And I went from there to my first fighter squadron in Oceania, out in Oceania, and I was VF-41. And I started out as executive officer and later became skipper of VF-41 and deployed with that squadron.
Where'd you deploy to, and on what?
To the Mediterranean.
Which carrier?
Again. That was on the Randolph as well, and it's an interesting thing. The Bennington was to be our aircraft carrier. Had been scheduled to it, and we were getting ready to go out to the Bennington, my squadron. We were in the ready room briefing for the flight to the ship. We'd already transferred all of our equipment and our support personnel aboard the ship, and the Bennington blew up the morning that we were supposed to fly out to the ship, and we did not fly out the day before because we found a crack in one of our wings. As a matter of fact, the first crack was in my airplane. And then we found that out of our 12 airplanes, 11 of them had cracked wings, and so our cruise on the Bennington was terminated, and we started a very intensive program to rebuild the wings or fix the wing. It was in the wing fold mechanism to get them fixed. And so that Bennington, we escaped the terror of that Bennington explosion.
There was a lot of lost lives on the Bennington, right?
There were 104 immediately lost, and then another 12, 15 died from burns that they'd received on there.
And had there not been the cracks on the wings of your airplanes, you would have been on board the Bennington when the fire happened.
That's right.
You were the next. I guess the two most famous fires that we hear about in naval aviation is the Bennington, and then of course the Forrestal off the coast of Vietnam. I guess about 12, 14 years later or so, in '67. When was the fire on the Forrestal?
Fire on the Forrestal was in '67, right?
And you were in Vietnam when the fire on the Forrestal. You almost were aboard the Forrestal as well, right?
Yes, I had served aboard the Forrestal as the Air Wing commander, and so I was quite familiar with it and loved it. It's the best flight deck I ever flew from, and so when it exploded in Vietnam, I was quite surprised that it had happened. But I was in Saigon, getting ready to return from my year in Saigon, and so that was on I think something like the 30th of July, 1967.
So we've just got a few seconds here, and then we're going to go to break, and then we're going to come back. We're here with Admiral Earl P. Buddy Yates, retired, the first skipper of the John F. Kennedy, and a famous guy around these parts because of his association with the John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier. We're on K-Talk Radio, 1650 AM, and the show is Justice for All. I'm your host, George Yates. The lines are open, 454-1650. If anyone wants to call in and make a comment or ask Admiral Yates a question, we're here on this Father's Day weekend. Our guest is my dad. We're going to go off to a break here, and we'll be right back.
Stay tuned for the next segment of Justice for All with George Yates.
Nor'easter season is here, so don't get all wet. Protect your house. Call Crawl Space Door Systems at 363-0005. Reduce your flood insurance, reduce the threat of mold and insects, and save energy. Crawl Space Doors, air vents, flood vents, vent covers, and fans can help you stay dry or get you dry quickly. Contact Crawl Space Doors for more information at 363-0005 or online at crawlspacedores.com. Stay dry, my friends.
Excellent Italian food is found at Spaghetti Eddie's, a neighborhood restaurant with a great family atmosphere and delicious Italian cuisine. Define Spaghetti Eddie's. New York-style pizza, pasta, subs, calzones, soups, salads will bring you back again and again. Log on to SpaghettiEddiesPizzaCafe.com and visit them at Greenbrier and Western Branch. Quality Italian food is at Spaghetti Eddie's.
The place to go for U.S. rare coins is Newcastle Coins and Collectibles in Chesapeake. They specialize in U.S. and silver and gold coins and provide free verbal offers and are always buying U.S. rare coins. Newcastle Coins and Collectibles, 681 North Battlefield Boulevard in Chesapeake, across from Chesapeake General, open Tuesday through Saturday and always online at NewcastleCollectibles.com. Call 757-609-3633, 757-609-3633 for Newcastle Coins and Collectibles.
We doubt ourselves, we doubt our beliefs, we doubt our institutions, and we doubt the law. But today you are the law.
We're here on WHKT Talk Radio, 1650 AM, Justice for All. I'm your host, George Yates, and today I have my special guest, my dad, Earl P. Buddy Yates, Rear Admiral, retired United States Navy. Before the break, Dad, we were talking about, you were mentioning the fires aboard the Bennington and the Forrestal, which everybody knows about the Forrestal, and the Bennington, of course, was a little bit before a lot of people's time, but that was just as serious of a fire, and they both are very famous and tragic events in naval aviation history. You mentioned that the Forrestal was your favorite carrier. You actually were the air group commander aboard the Forrestal. Tell us about that. That must have been quite an experience, being an air group commander aboard a United States aircraft carrier.
Well, it was my favorite flight deck on I'd flown off of practically every aircraft carrier in the fleet, and so they were the best. They were you measured other flight decks by how good the Forrestal was, and of course they'd been the longest in the fleet too, and they'd been working at it longer, and they had great guys on the ship. I thoroughly enjoyed that trip as the air group commander. I had inherited an air group that had been built by a guy named Jim Ferris, who later made Admiral, and he put the best people in that air group that you could possibly find anywhere. And so when I arrived on board, I thought to myself, I can't make this air group any better, but I can fly with them more and be part of their operation better, know what's going on in the air group. So I started flying all the airplanes in the air group, and I got day and night qualified aboard ship with 6 squadrons and 3 groups splinter groups, we called them. And that was a real experience. Just I could go out with anything any kind of flight that we shot off of the bow of that ship, I could be part of it. And it was a lot of fun, but also I think we had the air groups had the best safety record of any air group. We didn't lose a single plane from that year. Of course, I had a fantastic doctor who kept real close tabs on people who were getting a little shaky, and his name was Dr. Joseph Pursh, quite famous doctor, who later built the Betty Ford Rehab Center. That was probably the most fun I had the entire time I was in the Navy. It was such a fun job because I could not improve on those people and their training, and it was just wonderful to be in. Normally, you like to go in, if you're going to get yourself promoted, you go in to get a outfit that's no good and build it to make it a good squadron out of it. But the only way I could go on was the top air group, and from there, only way to go was probably down. So I spent my time flying and enjoyed it tremendously. And working with that flight deck was great.
Well, the Forrestal was commissioned, I believe. What was it? Was it a new carrier when you were there?
It was the carrier. It was the Forrestal class carrier. All the super carriers were named, but they were the part of the Forrestal class. It was the first of its class.
Now, the favorite carrier, I'm sure, in your life, though, is the Kennedy.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us about what it was like when you were first advised that you had just been picked by the Navy to be the pre-commissioning officer of the newest carrier in the Navy.
Well, it was quite an honor. First place, I didn't believe it.
You didn't believe it?
No, I thought
April Fool joke.
I thought they were joking with me. But it was a great honor to first place to get to know the Kennedy family, and Teddy Kennedy was he was very nice to me. He treated me very nicely. All the Kennedy people that I dealt with were very helpful and wanted to participate in building the best aircraft carrier that had ever been built.
Because at the time you were assigned to the ship, it was still being built by Newport News Shipbuilding, and you were assigned to it really to complete the Navy's, to actually get it ready for sea, correct?
Right. And to build the crew and to help with the building of the ship to the best of our abilities. And I can say that probably the most valuable gold nugget in the Navy's hip pocket is that Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company. They're a fantastic bunch. They've always been good, and I recognized and realized when I was there as the first skipper of the Kennedy. I was there through a year of the last year of their construction, and could see from a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis what skill and devotion and interest, and they were from the top to the bottom. They were all eager to do whatever had to be done to get the ship ready and out to sea. And as a matter of fact, we probably put to sea and went to on a deployment in fewer months than any ship in the history, any aircraft carrier in the history of the Navy. And the Navy has built 68 of them, so that's pretty good.
So when you hear about these delays in the construction of the newer carriers, that didn't happen with this particular ship. It was on time and actually ahead of time?
Well, it was right on time. They had gotten they'd run into a problem in one of the engines, and in not the installation, but getting the engines to put in it, and so it was actually a couple of weeks late in getting.
What was your most exciting time aboard the Kennedy? Would you say?
The most exciting time was the commissioning ceremony. We had Secretary McNamara, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We had all the Kennedy clan. We had the top political and social leaders in the local community there. It was a very gala occasion, and it was nice to be at the center of where it was all getting done.
I have a famous photo of you escorting while you're in your fancy Navy whites, and you're escorting Jackie Kennedy at the commissioning.
Yes.
And there's some great photos of that whole event. And this was in September of 1968. And what's fascinating is that the Navy decommissioned the John F. Kennedy in August of 2007, and then it had recently moved to Mayport from Norfolk. And you were in attendance when they decommissioned it, weren't you?
Right.
And so were almost all the other commanding officers who've been aboard the Kennedy.
We had a very high turnout. I think out of the 35 skippers that ship had, there were about 33 of them there. And we had a very gala farewell dinner. This was the last meal served on the ship. It was.
I heard stories. I did not get a chance to come with you, but I heard stories that people came up to you at the decommissioning of the Kennedy in 2007 and still had their program from the commissioning ceremony in 1968 and came up to you and asked you to sign their program. We have a caller. Well, that's awesome. And why don't we take the call and see what they have to say to Admiral Yates? Hello, caller?
Hello.
Yes. If you have a question or a comment for Admiral Yates?
I do have a question for Admiral Yates. Admiral Yates, considering all the amazing things that you've seen and been through, and thank you very much from the bottom of everybody's heart for what you've done for the country, what advice would you give to today's generation?
What advice would you give to today's generation, Admiral Yates?
Work hard, but have fun at it.
That's work hard, but have fun.
I like that advice, and I'm going to take that advice.
Oh, good. Thank you for your call.
Great show. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for calling. So, after the commissioning, you took the Kennedy to the Mediterranean, I believe, during the summer of 1969, and that was at a time when Neil Armstrong was walking on the moon, as a show that John F. Kennedy predicted that we would get to the moon within the decade. And so before the year 1969 was out, Kennedy, or the United States, made good on Kennedy's promise. And you were the skipper of the Kennedy in Europe at a time when the Kennedy name was still he was just so revered and missed. That must have just been an incredibly emotional experience for you to go to these various ports of call in the Mediterranean when a skipper of this great ship that was an ambassador of American power and goodwill. Describe that for me.
Well, that was a very interesting period. We arranged every time we went into port for a massive party for the local dignitaries and many of the pretty little girls that were there as well. And
you mean there weren't women serving on board the Kennedy?
No, they didn't give them to us in those days.
So there were no women serving aboard ship in those, unlike today's Navy.
No, you were not even allowed to have a woman on board overnight. So I had to get permission to get the ambassador to Paris, wife, who was the sister of John F. Kennedy. I had to get permission from the Secretary of the Navy in order to invite her to spend the night on the aircraft carrier. She was the first one to have that honor, and that was an interesting experience. But
go ahead. You were talking about going in and having the parties at the various.
Yes, we'd go into port and have a big party before we'd hardly go on liberty before we'd have the party. We'd have it as soon as we possibly could when we got into port. And the people just loved the name and the ship and were absolutely wonderful to me and to the crew. And people like Gregory Peck and the famous, a lot of the famous movie stars.
Grace Kelly.
Grace Kelly came aboard, and we had a party for Grace Kelly, and she danced with the troops. You know, wonderful, beautiful gal she was, and so nice. So we had a lot of fun with that. And we also did a lot of good work at sea, working with the British aircraft carriers and the French aircraft carriers. And we did a lot of good on that first cruise.
When you came back and you were relieved of command of the Kennedy, I guess in 1969, you made Rear Admiral.
Yeah.
And you were a Rear Admiral for 5 years and retired from the Navy in 1974, right? Is that about right?
Right.
So you were, what, about 50 years old? You had done a lifetime of work in the Navy, and you were still a young man when you got out of the Navy in 1950. I'm sorry, when you were at the age of 50 in 1974. You were when you were an admiral, you were actually, your last job was serving aboard the it was a land job in Honolulu, correct? Working for Admiral McCain and then Admiral Guyler.
Right.
Tell us about that, working for Admiral McCain. This would be John McCain, the senator's father, John McCain, right? Tell us about him.
He was a truly remarkable leader and was a strategic planner and very with a brilliant mind. And I learned tremendous amounts of how to run a big Navy fleet from him. He was probably one of the best I'd ever served under. I had worked for him once before when I was the skipper of the Raleigh, which had a helicopter flight deck on it. And incidentally, I learned to fly. The Marines taught me how to fly choppers, and I flew choppers off the Raleigh. But I had worked for him there and gotten to know him briefly, but he was 3 or 4 levels above me, as he was confib lad at the time, and I was skipper of one of his ships. I learned to appreciate his fantastic mind then, And then I was serving under it when in my last job. I thought that was quite a interesting thing. I sort of knew what to expect when I talked to him, and it was a beautiful association I had.
I remember a story you told me once about the Kennedy, the very first day you ever took the Kennedy to sea from Newport News Shipbuilding after it had been commissioned, and it was headed for the open ocean for the first time. And you mentioned something about dolphins. Can you tell our listeners about this? Because this, to me, is one of the most fascinating stories I think I've ever heard.
Well, we were about 25 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, headed and had just gone alongside, had not really put the lines over yet, but we were in the process of going alongside the oiler to fill our tanks with oil. And the sea suddenly became crowded with dolphins. They were all over. There must have been thousands of them. And it was said that, they missed the commissioning, so they were there, had their own little commissioning ceremony. It never happened again, but it happened that first time out, and I believe that really they had just heard a new set of propellers and noises of the ship, and each one is different. And they had come to investigate and see what it was. It was remarkable.
You've never seen anything like that before or since?
No.
So did you ever talk with anybody from SeaWorld about it and ask any dolphin scientists as to what they could do, any kind of explanation for that?
No, but that was an interesting thing. It lasted for about 45 minutes to an hour, and they would get in groups of maybe 30 or 40 or 50 and steam and race down between the two ships, and then turn around and come back and do it again. It's amazing.
As director of plans for the Pacific Fleet, you were in Manila, I believe, when the prisoners of war came home from Vietnam. My recollection is you were among the first to shake Admiral Jeremiah Denton's hand when he got off the airplane.
That was true, and I'd had an old one. There's young naval officer named Duffy, who had been in my squadron in VAH-9 down in Sanford, Florida. I had no idea that he was a prisoner of war.
Oh, my God.
And he showed up coming off the airplane. I was so thrilled to see that young guy. That was an emotional experience of enormous proportions when those guys came out of the Hanoi Hilton.
When you, that just has to be. And shortly after that, you retired, and you spent a couple of years in business, and then spent, most of the next 20 years on a sailboat as skipper of another type of vessel with your wife, my mother. Tell us about that as a part of your life. You had a sailboat called the Pukakai, which you spent just about, you were one, I guess what they call, what is it, a snowbird?
Yeah, we were snowbirds for 17 out of 18 years after I quit my day job. And every fall we would sail down to Lake Worth and then over to the Bahamas, and then from the northeastern or northwestern section of the Bahamas down through the Bahamas and into the Caribbean, And you'd also sailed that yourself. You're well aware of it. But we missed 1 year, the year my mother died, and but for 17 years, we would then come back the day after April the 15th.
Well, you always knew where the conchs were. You always knew where the best fishing was. I'd come down there to visit, and it would be, let's get in the dinghy and let's go out to Dad's favorite fishing hole. And we'd all get on our snorkels and get our Hawaiian slings and go over the side and stand on our heads in coral reefs until we got some dinner. I mean, it was a pretty nice life doing that, isn't it?
Yeah, that was.
And you did that with my mom for those 17 out of 18 years. And then she had some health problems, and you could no longer do that. And
That's right.
And that did come to an end. But boy, what a run that was, able to go down there and do that. That's a beautiful little part of the world there. You've got your Man-O-War Key, and you've got your that beautiful lighthouse there. Was that Elbow Key? Hopetown?
Hopetown.
Right. Tell us about your greatest experience, or your most fun about those years of sailing. I know you had great friends that you would see year after year after year that would come back up, and you would see the same folks they did the same thing they made that tour up and down the East Coast, right?
Well, one thing, we had one friend who owned right near Hopetown, owned a little bay that you could anchor in, and his name was Valentine Worthington. And Val Worthington had been the head of the Navy's leading oceanographic school up in New England, and he had a big antenna that he'd built that was the only guy in the Bahamas, I think, at the time, who could get live TV from Miami. And so one of the things that we loved to do, because Lucy liked the show Jeopardy, she liked to go. So we worked up our schedule so that we could, when Val Worthy was there, we could go get his TV and see Jeopardy in the Bahamas.
Such a different time. I mean, this was before satellite navigation, before cell phones, before I guess you kind of hit some of that cell phone stuff towards the end of those years. But I remember my time sailing in the Caribbean. We didn't have the gadgets. We used sextants even back in the day. And in fact, when I first started using a sextant, I remember talking with you. You had I know that you'd been a navigator aboard the Dyson, right? So you had a lot of that old type ship driving experience. And we just have a couple of more minutes left. So we just have 2 minutes left. And I know there's so many things that we could go at least another hour with this guest, seems like every guest I've got. It's been really great having Buddy Yates here today. Is there anything else that we've not talked about that you would like to talk about today, Dad? We got about a minute.
Well, there are several things that I'd like to talk about. Number one,
you only got a minute.
I'd like to say thank all of those great shipmates I had in every squadron ship unit that I was involved with. I had the greatest people working with me anybody could find in this world. And I just recommend that all you young people who are looking for something to do, you give Uncle Sam's Navy a shot, because you'll be associating with the best guys there are anywhere. I don't know about the women. They didn't give them to us when. I don't know why they give them to them now, but I can't speak to the women. You speak for the women.
This has been a wonderful hour with Buddy Yates, my dad. I want to thank him for coming on the show today. I want to do a special shout out to my brother Eric, who's over in the VA hospital. He's a veteran himself, and he's going through a troubled time right now. So best wishes on this Father's Day to all of Admiral Yates' children. That would be my sister Abby, of course my brother Eric, my sister Susan, and my brother Phil, who's coming in tomorrow to visit my dad here for Father's Day. This has been a great edition of Justice for All. I'm your host, George Yates. We're going to be here again next Saturday from 2 to 3, and thank you for listening to our show today. And this is just another edition of it. So have fun. It's a lovely day out there, and we'll see you next Saturday. Have a great Father's Day tomorrow.